1% of the 1%.
Significant ones, but I guess they are the most significant ones, yes.
I'm just trying to figure out how I would figure out what percent of the wealthy is black. Where's the line for wealthy?
Significantly lower than
the top 1%. Okay, well, where's the line?
There is no objective line. You have to set a threshold based on logic.
What, like households that make like $500K a year?
That's way more than
wealthy. 250K? Is that wealthy?
It depends on your definition of wealthy. About going by my definition of wealthy, a single income home that makes like $100,000 is wealthy.
They still struggle too much. I don't have internet. It's hard to raise a family with like 3 kids with a $100,000 income and give them everything that they want.
It's also hard to give kids everything they want with $500K. Like, so everything you want is not like the line.
Yeah, I know. Is your thing on?
Should be.
It's not.
Cycle your thing.
I think you should quote from it. I think you should read it. Because I don't actually think it's particularly individual. I think it's actually a distillation of what's in the water. And, this is where some people are at. And I think it's actually a clear recitation. You could just read from the El Paso Shooters Manifesto because it's very similar, except, change black people with Latinos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is literally at the top. There's a picture of that symbol that has been worn by so many folks over in the Azov Battalion. And then it starts what you need to know. If there's one thing I want you to get from these writings, it's that white birth rates must change. Every day the white population becomes fewer in number. To maintain a population, the people must achieve a birth rate that reaches replacement fertility levels. I'm skipping ahead a little, but not in Europe, not in the rest of America, not in Australia or New Zealand, only in white people are failing to reproduce, failing to create families, failing to have children. But despite this sub-replacement fertility rate, the population in the West is increasing rapidly. How is this possible? Mass immigration and the higher fertility rates of the immigrants themselves are causing this increase in the population. We're experiencing an invasion on a level never before seen in history. Millions of people pouring across our borders, legally invited by the state and corporate entities to replace white people who have failed to reproduce, failed to create the cheap labor, failed to create new consumers in a tax base that the corporations and states need to have
to thrive.
Right.
He goes on
there's a lot
to say this.
language a little bit, and I say a little bit because Ukrainian and Russian are different, but like not that different. And so you're gonna have to give up a sense of sovereignty. You're gonna have to change where you pay your taxes. In a lot of ways, your culture and your sense of government has been invaded and transformed. That's what's at stake. That's why you don't immediately surrender and just give up the flags and say like, oh, I guess we're Russian now, right? So.
I need to find Tucker Carlson talking about this shooting. I need to hear him sincerely say he thought it was disgusting.
Okay, go find it then.
Right. I mean, I know it's out there.
Yeah.
What is the name? What's the where? Where was it?
Buffalo.
Buffalo. I need internet.
Okay, well, that's a matter of location. We're getting out of here currently.
No, your thingy is it on? Or now it is. It's like they think that black people shouldn't have to prove they should get the best. Everyone has to prove that. Whether you think that's a good thing or not.
What do you mean by the best?
Because we've gotten all the basics for the most part, you know? But we don't have...
People who disagree with Joe.
Okay, so I was just thinking about it in like this. So there's nothing that black people can't accomplish. There's a little bit more obstacles in the way. Yeah. Sometimes a lot more.
Just like it's harder for a white guy to make his way to bench pressing 400 pounds than it is for a black guy.
So So I understand that people don't like the concept of there being more obstacles in the way for a black person than there is for a white person.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, that is 100% legitimate. But we have to understand that when we do get there, we are stronger for that. When we go over those obstacles, we tend to be better performers when we get to the end line than the person who had less obstacles, because that's just the nature of the thing.
Just like anyone who faces their insecurities head on.
And we have to understand that that's something that's only temporary in nature. Once you've done it enough times, once you've gone through enough obstacles, once you've proven that no matter how many obstacles you've put in my way, I'm going to get there, it's not going to be worth it to put the obstacles anymore.
Also, no one will really have the power to put obstacles in your way at that point.
At that point.
That's the whole point of sticking with it the whole time.
That's where white people are at.
Yeah, that's why we did that, yeah.
Yes. So I don't get this mindset. Like, that's not possible for black people, or like that's not worth it for black people.
No, neither of those things make any sense.
Neither of
whatsoever.
those things make any fucking sense.
Yeah. Sure, it won't look quite the same.
Hell no. But it will look damn great when it happens.
It will look damned great when it'll look like Wakanda.
Yes.
Okay? What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that? Oh, that it was hard to do?
LOL, everything is hard. Everything worth it.
Everything worth it is difficult.
Yeah. You're strong. Get it done.
Yes.
I know you're strong. You know?
What do you really expect that is better for us, for it all to just be handed? You really think that's better? There's no way. There's no way you think that's better. You're dumb if you think that's better.
There are quite a few dumb people out there. Now, the problem is the reason it's so easy to convince people that it's good to just give people everything they want is because there's so many conservatives out there mistakenly making the argument that it's never good to give anyone something just because they want or even need it if they haven't, quote, earned it, which is a very tricky thing to define, what someone deserves or what someone has earned.
It's less tricky than people make it out to be.
Well, yeah, everyone deserves everything pretty much,
but they don't deserve to just have that shit handed to them.
No,
everyone deserves the opportunities to get everything for themselves.
Yeah, and
that's all.
And everybody deserves for everyone else to try their best to figure out ways for them to get the things that they need while still paying for them.
Like I said, the opportunity.
Yeah.
Not the thing. The opportunity to get the thing.
Yes, but it should be fantastically accessible.
Yes, that's what having the opportunity is.
Uh-huh. People just really underestimate how accessible these things can be. How easy it could be to get a house or a car or a business loan.
Uh-huh.
Or a fucking personal loan.
Uh-huh.
Biden, according to Joe Biden, are now a, quote, existential threat to the nation, like Al-Qaeda or climate change. A threat that by definition is entirely possible. That's what politicians typically do when they're down. They listen to the people who might re-elect them. But Biden doesn't plan to do that, and we know for a fact because Politico has reported it. Instead, Biden has decided to attack people who disapprove. According to Politico, quote, Biden has taken to telling his aides that he no longer recognizes the GOP, which he now views as an existential threat to the nation's democracy. End quote. People who disagree with Joe Biden, according to Joe Biden, are now a, quote, existential threat to the nation, like Al-Qaeda or climate change. A threat that by definition is so profound we must declare war upon it if we're to survive. Now, keep in mind, this threat that Biden is referring to is you. He's talking about his fellow Americans. No president has ever spoken like this, ever. Joe Biden does it regularly, and he's certain to do it again tomorrow. But most painful and destructive of all, Biden is likely to use racial wounds in order to make his point. There is no behavior worse than this. All race politics is bad, no matter what flavor those politics happen to be. No race
Did you hear
politics
that?
is better than any other. All of it
Hear
is
what?
poison.
Tucker Carlson just said all race politics is bad.
Yeah. Don't know exactly what he means by race politics.
He means all racialization of politics.
Yeah, well, but some races just have certain race-specific problems, so I don't know if I agree.
Well, all races have race-specific problems.
Yeah, yes, all races have race-specific problems, so I don't really agree with that.
No, of course we don't. Of course, that's not consistent with my position on race. However, it is something that would sound coherent to a Democrat. However,
Yes.
uh-huh.
No, that's definitely some democratic shit.
Well, that's his point. He's trying to speak to them in their language. He's trying to break the spell. And he probably also genuinely believes it's bad to be racist.
Duh.
Duh.
That's why he's saying that.
Yes. He does. He genuinely does speak their language. I mean, that's what we're
That's
seeing.
why he gets so offended.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yes, obviously, yes.
For them, when they call him a white supremacist.
Yeah. He's like, fuck you, I'm not a white supremacist.
You know, some of my best buddies in college were black, and I'm not saying that ironically.
Right. Yeah. Shit like that, yeah.
Yeah, I guarantee you that was the case. He's got some really great drinking buddies that are black.
I'd be shocked. I would say so.
Certainly, what taught my dad having really good drinking white buddies certainly taught me to look at white people a little bit differently.
In a very significant way.
Yes.
Yeah. More than a little bit differently.
Uh-huh.
Right. If they're cool enough for my dad to hang out with,
They must not be that goddamn bad now,
How bad could they be?
Right. He's got this nice house with this giant trampoline.
Let's deal with one theme at a time.
Sure.
Invasion, right? So let's say you're in the Ukraine.
They're picking apart the words of an insane person.
Mm-hmm.
Literally mentally ill.
And literally acting as if it represents a, majority white opinion.
Okay, let's pick this apart piece by piece. Yes! As if it's disgusting. No one should be seeing this and thinking anything but, wow, this is really sad. This is a horrible tragedy. This should have never happened.
They're unironically doing their part to make what they're fantasizing about closer to reality,
Yes.
sadly.
Which is why no one should be reading it. That should be evidence for the police, and that's basically where it should stay.
I mean, reading it, I'm fine with in a different context.
Sure, but I mean, how much detail do we really need to go into on some crazy guy's words? 180-page essay that he wrote right before killing a bunch of people.
I mean, I think it matters a lot to understand the mind of someone who's willing to do something like that. It matters how crazy he was, and it matters what he believed in, and it only matters so much, but it matters. I think it's important. I I just think these people are framing it.
I just definitely don't think that shit. I mean, I don't see any legitimate purpose in being read to the public for people who are wanting to go study the mind of killers or mental illness or something along those lines. I definitely see the value of reading it, but just the general public, I don't see the benefits. It would just freak people out, in my opinion. If you want to go search, I'm not saying hide the information, make it public information, sure, but read to the masses, I don't see a lot of context where that's beneficial.
That's not what they're doing, though. They're quoting specific parts of it that are relevant to the points that they're trying to make politically. I don't think that that's a wrong thing to do.
That wasn't. I don't even see that. Okay, so they were just quoting the Great Replacement references from the manifesto.
They're quoting the parts of the manifesto that bolster the arguments that they're making politically.
Okay, I wasn't sure about their very specific use of reading the thing. I thought they were just reading the goddamn. It sounded like she was just reading the thing to read the damn thing. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, oh my god, look how disgusting this is, type deal.
There was certainly some degree of that in there, but I don't know.
I mean, because right before she started reading it, I don't remember her stating her exact purpose for reading it, but I can pick it up from the context.
Yeah, well, she's frequently insufficiently specific.
And Russia invades. Right? They're going to change your way of your life. You're going to have to go to one theme at a time.
Sure.
Invasion. Right? So let's say you're in the Ukraine and Russia invades. Right? They're going to change your way of your life. You're going to have to go to a re-education camp. You're going to have to give up your language a little bit. And I say a little bit because Ukrainian and Russian are different, but like not that different. And so you're going to have to give up a sense of sovereignty. You're going to have to change where you pay your taxes. In a lot of ways, your culture and your sense of government has been invaded and transformed. That's what's at stake. That's why you don't immediately surrender and just give up the flags and say like, oh, I guess we're Russian now, right? So if you think that's the stakes in the Ukraine, the United States is willing to just give you guns to fight it out, right? So the question is, for me, is that much different than this guy Gendron, what he feels like is going to happen in the United States, right? So what happens when the white Christian nation falls, right? So let's say black people get reparations. There's this idea that black people can get reparations, white people aren't going to have to give up anything, it'll be fine, except black people will have like commercial land and money and assets and all this stuff that we don't have right now. I actually think that's a naive understanding of how reparations is going to work. I think if black people are going to be made whole, like it's going to take... What is this guy talking? What was the question? What is he answering? He's gone like to 5 different topics.
Rewind as far as you need to. I can't keep track of all this bullshit.
I thought they were talking about the Great Replacement Theory. Okay.
Yeah, that they still are.
Okay. So they were.
That kind of white culture is invisibilized here. And part of what's doing that work in the context of advancing the kinds of policies that people actually want politicians to advance, and instead sitting back and saying, to me, it was an argument for others Republicans, because the Republicans took 2 races last weekend, both of which are identity motivated, only one, and we are in a controversial moment right now. Or is one of the people I most enjoy talking to because he doesn't mind getting in the weeds and saying and expressing thoughts, feelings, and opinions that are controversial. And we are in a controversial moment right now as the country is reeling in the aftermath of 2 shootings last. both of which are identity motivated, only one of which is racially motivated, and we can unpack that a little bit later. Irene, you reached out to me,
Yes.
saying that the last conversation we had on this podcast in the wake of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting was vindicated. Your take was vindicated by this.
Reintroduced, saying that the last conversation we had on this podcast in the wake of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting was vindicated. Your take was vindicated by this.
To reintroduce you to the audience, he's a grad student at the University of Georgia, host of The Funky Academic, a political thinker, Irene Ose Frimpong. Welcome back to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me back. It's exciting to chop it up with you. I always enjoy my time here.
So remind us what your take was last time that you feel like has been vindicated by the situation that's emerged in Buffalo.
Well, I think America is a white nationalist nation, but it's very orderly, and that is the deal that the whites offer everybody else, including the blacks like us, an orderly white nationalism where if you actually just, they'll keep the order if you behave, and they'll even let you get a nice house in the suburb next to them if they want to. It'll be an orderly white nationalism, and all you have to do is accept the fact that it's not actually self-governance, but quality of nationalism that's at stake. And that's acceptable to a lot of people, especially if they come from failed states.
Okay, this argument doesn't like it.
Yeah, what he just said doesn't
sense.
actually mean anything. Yeah,
Doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it's not logical, and it's not even coherent.
So no, it's not coherent. That's what I'm trying to say. So white people.
It's not even wrong. It just doesn't mean anything.
No, yeah, it's it does, like the words he used.
Yep, he used those words incorrectly. He raped the fuck out of the words he used.
Yeah.
And sentence that might sound to a liberal like it means something, or a leftist, but literally doesn't mean anything.
So I'm just gonna try to repeat.
Yeah. Try to mind read that.
Yeah. Hang on, I have to replug.
Yes, before your phone dies, it says that's cheater can't die. Heyo, it's midnight.
Means we must have a little money, huh?
More than a little.
Oh yeah, that's good.
I don't know how much, but it's more than a little, I'm sure.
Oof, okay, we need a generator for the car too, because the two plugs is always. Oh my god, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Okay. What was I?
So we can plug more shit in at one time. But we really need a generator. But that shit, it costs more.
Pretty sure you can probably get a small one for like $20 or something. You can at least start with that. Shit.
We have to see what it costs.
Okay, so I believe. All right, so this dude said that he had a term for it, something white nationalist.
You better get his real term.
I know. My shit is. I don't have. Your thingy went off.
Drunk motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Did you find it? I know. That's so funny.
Oh my god, I can't.
I know.
Okay.
But you so can.
I know.
so can.
Let's go.
30,
Load.
30 frames, bruh.
30 frames, man.
Always what I like to see. It's like, hey, it's taking 30 screenshots for
Per second. Yes.
Bro, wait, with audio? LOL.
That's amazing. That's what I like to see.
What's your name?
And maybe you've heard it. I heard it like 30 years ago. Oh, America will be
hot on the tip of everybody's tongue because it seems to explain,
our internal colony, functionally.
What are you doing?
I have to rewind.
last weekend, both of which are identity motivated, only one of which is racially motivated, and we can unpack that a little bit later. Irene, you reached out to me
Yes.
saying that by this. So I want to reintroduce you to the audience. He's a grad.
Always enjoy my time here.
So remind us what your take was last time that you feel like has been vindicated by the situation that's emerged in Buffalo.
Well, I think America is a white nationalist nation, but it's very orderly, and that is the deal that the whites offer everybody else.
White, orderly
White
nationalist nation.
Oh, no, but specifically the concept is orderly white nationalism.
Orderly white nationalism.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Including the blacks like us, an orderly white nationalism.
Or OWN for short.
Oh, okay. All right, I see that.
Sign me up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
They'll keep you order if you behave, and they'll even let you excel. And you can get a nice house in the suburb next to them if they want to. It'll be an orderly white nationalism, and all you have to do is accept the fact that it's not actually self-governance, but equality of nationalism that's at stake.
So when he says it's not actually self-governance, but equality of nationalism, what the first part of that, he's just saying it's actually
self-governance.
He's saying,
but you don't get equality in your nationalism of race.
What? Okay, what I hear is he's saying free will is a lie, so therefore racism is gonna rape you, and then I don't know what he means at all when he says quality of nationalism.
Equality of nationalism.
What? No, a quality of nationalism.
No, I hear equality.
Really white nationalism, and all you have to do is accept the fact that it's not actually self-governance, but equality of nationalism that's at stake. All you have to do is accept the fact that it's not actually self-governance, but nationalism that's at stake. And
I have no idea what.
Me neither. The plain meaning of his words don't make sense.
that's a lot of people, especially if they come from.
What? To a lot of people.
Uh-huh. See, this is his shtick. Throw out some CRT gobbledygook bullshit, and then say, well, lots of fucking assholes are completely okay with that. Luckily, he's talking to her, so hopefully we'll get some details eventually.
He said that that self-governance is not at stake, but either equality of nationalism or a quality of nationalism is at stake. And I would say it's probably a quality of nationalism is what he said, not equality.
Uh-huh.
So to me, that means that you get self-governance, but you don't get a certain degree of nationalism. You don't get the equal level of nationalism that white people get. Or a quality of nationalism that white people get, you do not get.
Even after all that mind reading, it doesn't make any sense to me.
He's saying that white people will let black people do whatever they want. They just can't believe in blackness as much as white people believe in whiteness.
I think you're being far too kind to what he meant. I think he needs to be way more fucking specific.
I do too. That's just with my very logical brain, that is the only kind of logic that I can apply to what he said.
Okay, well.
I'm not assuming that that's what he means. I'm just saying if I was going to apply any logic to the words he used, that would be the logic.
Maybe you should say something like, perhaps he meant, or something along those lines.
Sure. How about I say I have no fucking clue what the guy meant. Like I said, if I was going to apply any kind of logic to the words he used, that is the logic that I would apply. I am not assuming that is what that man means, and I would definitely want him to explain it to me.
But just to be clear, what was the thing again that you thought it might be?
That white people will allow black people to do whatever they want, except they're not allowed to believe in blackness as much as white people are allowed to believe in whiteness.
That feels like it could be what he's trying to say, but again, like you said.
Yeah, Not gonna make any kind of assumptions. Have no clue.
Certainly not gonna give him the credit of assuming that that's what he's fucking saying.
No.
But we'll see.
Failed states, or they don't nationalism that's at stake, and that's acceptable to a lot of people, especially if they come from failed states, or they don't really want to govern, they just kind of want to earn money, right? So we live, and I'm American South right now, and I just consider this an internal colony, functionally, you know.
Now I'm confused because I don't know if he thinks that white people are taking away our ability to govern or not.
That has to be what he's saying, but I don't know how.
It has to be a part of it.
I don't know how you think that derives from his gobbledygook, but
he just said it's not self-governance at stake, but a quality of white nationalism. But then he did.
Alright, I just have a DoorDash for Diamond B. Thanks.
No,
No, I have no idea what that means to him, or at all.
Me either.
And I don't think it's reasonable to expect that I possibly could know.
No.
I think he's fucking insane. He's actually sounds way more insane than he actually is. So I'd like him to fucking use words and sentences that are coherent.
Everything you said.
You could say that, like, white people, black people have been here too, and they're a big part of the population. Own anything. Like, look at commercial real estate. You don't own anything in a capitalist society. That means you're not really in the game. You're just...
Again, that's not
you wish for, bro. If you tell people to look at commercial real estate,
yeah,
they might actually Google the stats on that.
I'm just saying, I did, and I found that black people own just 5 percentage points less of their population in this country. So black people make up 13.4% of the population in this country, and they own 8.4 of commercial real estate in this country. Okay? Would we like it to be perfectly aligned? Yes. Is it heading in that direction? Fuck yeah. I don't want to hear that we don't own anything. Damn near 1 out of 10 of all commercial anything is owned by a black person.
And if you look at black men specifically, it's even closer, I think, to being proportional
because I'm just going out on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure that black men earn more money than black women.
It definitely, when you get into the money that it takes to invest in anything or start a business, for sure.
Yeah, just like total per year money earned.
Yeah.
Because men tend to vastly out earn women. Just
Yeah. So if you look at the numbers of what percent is owned by a black man versus what percent is owned by a black woman, they're gonna average out to that 8.4%. Those two numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's my point. That's how you get the 8.4.
Right.
So
If you
my point is, if you only
just
look at,
took the men, yeah,
and what their percentage of the population is,
yeah,
without the women,
right, you would see
be even
closer to
yep,
that 13.4%.
Well, it wouldn't be. It would be half of 13.4%, but it would be
right. It would be closer
it would
to
be proportionately closer to that number.
right, that half of that number.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Which is what 13 is 7.7.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably like 6% or 7% or something like that.
Or something.
If I had to guess.
Yeah. Some shit like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which again is damn close to 1 of 10.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's a player on someone else's game. You're like a minor character in chess. We might be like a knight or like a few pawns, but we're not taking pieces, right? So, and we're definitely.
LOL.
As if knights and pawns don't take pieces, first of all.
First of all. Have you ever played a game of chess?
Yeah, he does play chess, actually. That's why he used it as a fucking... He likes chess.
Now, if we actually looked at all of the races as a game of chess, okay? Just humanity as a game of chess. It's
Black-
Most of the pieces.
Yes! First of all,
White people are like the king, maybe the queen too, maybe.
maybe. And then, like, brown people are literally all the rest.
The fuck? Maybe you have like some Asian bishops. Like what? What the fuck? All the pawns and the rooks and the knights? That's not good enough?
You do know that black people can't be all the pieces, right?
Y'all are doing like most of the shit. Y'all, like, without you, either side is fucked.
Mm-hmm.
So, not taking pieces. Sure.
Sure.
We're not taking pieces, and we're certainly not a side.
Guess what? No one is a side.
Oh, well.
On their own, no one is a side. Not one race is a side.
Not a winning side.
No.
Not by themselves.
No, they don't fill the whole board. Not one.
They don't fill. No one of us fills half of a board.
No.
That's not how this shit
It's not
works.
how it works.
The board is the world.
Yes, the board is the world.
Right.
And trust me, white people aren't all on one side of it.
I just have a DoorDash Diamond B.
Can't unpause because of your stupid rule.
It's not stupid in any way. Thank you. Have a nice night.
So what I'm saying is that America offers its citizens a form of orderly white supremacy or white nationalism. And if the whites feel like that's going to be slipping away, you have to imagine that there's going to be backlash. And you can't be surprised when there's backlash about that, right?
I want to get into this idea of what it means to have.
I love how they just assume that everyone's just supposed to agree that this is just a white supremacist society. Like, you don't need to say why. You don't feel like you need to say why that is the case.
I think he feels he just did say why that is the case.
He didn't.
I know, but he feels he did. It sounds like.
He gave no proof. Oh, the closest he came was saying incorrectly that we don't own anything.
And whatever the fuck gobbledygook he said in that one sentence.
No,
that I
no,
can't decipher.
no. That was just stating a concept. That wasn't having any proof for that concept.
So, yeah, but even if you're at the level where you're claiming you're using logic as evidence, yeah,
I don't think he was claiming he was
Okay.
using logic as evidence.
even
I
if
think
he
he
did
was
make
just
that claim.
stating a claim and not giving any proof. All he said was we live. I guess, yeah, you're right. He was trying to use logic as evidence.
That's the kind of man he is. He's like me, but really, really shitty.
Okay, but if you're gonna try to use logic as evidence,
Yeah,
you gotta have
coherent.
airtight logic.
Gotta be coherent. Gotta come correct with that logic, bitch. Real correct.
The logic has to be naturally intuitive.
Yeah. It has to be third party accessible.
Yes.
And it has to be perfectly internally consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yours didn't meet any of those bars.
It didn't even clear the first fucking bar of being coherent.
Nope.
Didn't make sense in the English
You know,
language.
I had to try very hard to try to read your mind of even what you meant, and
I
don't.
know for a fact.
I was wrong.
Yes. It's like when you're looking at a chess puzzle, but actually whoever made the chess puzzle fucked up, and there is no best move. Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
An orderly white
since we're doing chess analogies. Uh-huh.
We've been on 30 FPS for a minute. I swear to God.
It's because a bunch of people
went to sleep.
That's
that's
unironically
yes.
the reason.
Yeah.
I can't. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Motherfucker, I will take it.
I swear to God.
I'm grateful.
Mm-hmm.
So grateful.
Just slipping away, you have to imagine that there's going to be backlash. And you can't be surprised when there's backlash about that, right?
I want to get into this idea of what it means to have an orderly white nationalism, because I know that there are folks who are going to, their ears are going to perk up at that. They're not going to
perk up. That's a way to describe it.
Uh-huh.
Those are some words to describe the feeling that I'm feeling right now.
She knows that your ears perked up. She predicted it.
Perk up. LOL.
No, the perky now.
Okay, bitch. Okay.
know quite what to make of that. But let's set the stage a little bit. No, I'm sure that most folks who are listening to this at this point, airing on Thursday, almost a week, better part of a week after the shooting happened, know that the gunman was a white 18-year-old who, according to his screed that he wrote, some people are the shoot know quite what to make of that. But let's set the stage a little bit. Yeah,
they changed topics at literally warp 5.
So we're gonna go from him trying to define white or orderly white nationalism, but we're gonna set the tone for that by talking about a maniac killing X amount of people, because that will set the tone. Because that means, since this literally mentally ill person killed a number of black people that were living in a national orderly white. What is orderly about that? First of all,
so what she's doing right now is explaining why she's having irony on the show.
Yeah, I know, but first she asks him. She's like, okay, let's define orderly white nationalism. Then she says, but we're going to set the tone by talking about the Buffalo shooting.
Okay, I'll take your word for it that was the order of operations.
Sure that most folks who are listening to this at this point, airing on Thursday, almost a week, better part of a week after the shooting happened, know that the gunman was a white 18.
Just slipping away, you have to imagine that there's going to be backlash. And you can't be surprised when there's backlash about
So
that, right?
I want to get into this idea of what it means to have an orderly white nationalism, because I know that there are folks who are gonna, their ears are gonna perk up at that. They're not gonna know quite what to make of that. But let's set the stage a little bit. No, I'm
Let's set the stage, but let's set the stage a little bit.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Then she goes on to talk about the Buffalo fucking shooting.
sure that most folks who are listening to
I
this
know some, but
nationalism, because I know that there are.
I know some people are going to be pissed like fuck about what you just said. But let's piss them off more before we get back to talking about that more. And that's actually literally not what she intends to do in this moment.
But that's exactly what she's doing.
How fun.
Be slipping away, you have to imagine that there's going to be backlash. And you can't be surprised when there's backlash about
So
that, right?
I want to get into this idea of what it means to have an orderly white nationalism, because I know that there are folks who are gonna, their ears are gonna perk up at that. And they're not gonna know quite what to make of that. But let's set the stage a little bit.
Pause.
No, I'm sure that most folks who are listening.
That was the unperkiest way I've ever heard someone say the word perky.
Yeah, perk
up.
up a little bit.
Perk up.
Uh-huh.
Perk up. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
To this at this point, airing on Thursday, almost a week, better part of a week after the shooting happened. Know that the gunman was a white 18-year-old who
Mentally ill, kind of important. Just glossing over that. Just not even going to mention it at all.
Probably she feels that it's so obvious as to not need to be said. Playing devil's advocate here.
But then you're going to act like his motivations for this is not abnormal.
What?
So it's so obvious that this guy was mentally ill that it doesn't need to be said. But then you're gonna act like his motivations for the killing is like something that most people feel.
Oh, well, I don't know how much she's going to act like that because we haven't gotten far enough into the video yet.
Well, they go on to read the manifesto. And she does it because the dude is like, well, this is what like all white people are thinking right now, so you totally read it.
Okay, but that we still haven't gotten far enough into the video at any point yet to actually hear her say what the fuck she thinks for real.
To his screed that he wrote, some people are referring to it as a manifesto. Some people are advising not to do so. I don't know what to do with that at this point. But in his manifesto, specifically evoked replacement theory, which is something that is now.
What do you mean you don't know what to do with that at this point? What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to read the goddamn thing. You're supposed to know what the definition of a manifesto is. You're supposed to decide for yourself if you think it's a manifesto.
Well, she did do that because she just called it
A manifesto. Yeah. Then don't say you don't know what to make of that.
That's just her snarky way of bitching at Democrats that are bitching at her.
No, I didn't. I mean, the only person I've heard not call it a manifesto is Tucker. I would, and he said.
My reading of when she says some people are saying you shouldn't call it that. My interpretation was that that's what Democrats were saying, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well, Tucker was saying don't call it a man. Then that would be one of the very rare times in history that Democrats and Republicans agree, because Tucker is also saying don't call it a manifesto because it's written by some insane guy, and a manifesto is supposed to be like some kind of doctrine for like it's supposed to be like documentation of starting a mindset or something. You know what I mean? Specifically like some kind of rebellious group. You know what I mean?
I was distracted.
So you didn't hear anything I said?
Not enough to respond.
Hot on the tip of everybody's tongue because it seems to explain, because it is a theory that has kind of leapt from what the kind of cloistered white supremacist websites and has been mainstreamed by some folks like Tucker Carlson. Now, people say it's not an explicitly racist theory. Tucker Carlson would say that it's not racist at all, that he's simply pointing out the truth, the reality, which is that America's population is being replaced by others, meaning immigrants, and that people who are here already, legacy Americans is a term that he's used to describe them. Again, not an explicitly racialized term, but legacy Americans, the ones who are already here, are disadvantaged by these immigrant groups that think differently and, most importantly, vote differently than Americans here. And he points to Democrats who have, in fact, made statements about demographic changes inuring to their benefit, their political benefit. Basically, I would argue, giving up on the idea of
Oh yeah, the thing.
Them again, not an explicitly racialized term, replacement theory, which is something that is now hot at this point, airing on Thursday, almost a week, better part of a week after the shooting happened. Know that the gunman was a white 18-year-old who, according to his screed that he wrote, some people are referring to it as a manifesto. Some people are advising not to do so. I don't know what to do with that at this point. But in his manifesto, specifically evoked replacement theory, which is something that is now hot on the tip of everybody's tongue because it seems to explain, because it is a theory that has kind of leapt from what kind of cloistered white supremacist websites and has been mainstreamed by some folks like Tucker Carlson. Now people say it's not an explicitly racist theory. Tucker Carlson would say that it's not racist at all, that he's simply pointing out the truth, the reality, which is that America's population is being replaced by others, meaning immigrants, and that people who are here already, legacy Americans is a term that he's used to describe them. Again, not an explicitly racialized term, but legacy Americans, the ones who are already here, are disadvantaged by these immigrant groups that think differently and, most importantly, vote differently than Americans here. And he points to Democrats who have, in fact, made statements about demographic changes inuring to their benefit, their political benefit. Basically, I would argue, giving up on the idea of actually persuading voters or talking to voters, confident in the idea that more Latino voters will basically mean the Democrats don't have to try because there's a demographic inevitability there. Tucker Carlson has picked up on that lingo that's been coming out of the Democratic Party from some time now, from people like Steve Phillips, who wrote The Browning of America, and said, look, they're saying it. They're saying it out loud. This is what's happening. This is a threat to a conservative way of life, to the Republican Party. And of course, I'm going to be opposed to immigration that hurts my political interest. Now, in return, Democrats say that is racist, but what's not kind of ambiguous is that the shooter explicitly referenced right at the top of his manifesto this replacement theory, and he framed it in explicitly racial terms, saying, is it wrong to quote from it? Like, are we not supposed to read from it?
Look, I think you should quote from it. I think you should read it. Because I don't actually think it's particularly individual. I think it's actually a distillation of what's...
So she's saying that because other people are using the great replacement theory in racial terms, that inherently it's a racist theory. or that it probably is a racist theory, bare minimum. And that even when Tucker Carlson uses it, it's racist. He's just not using the racist version. But I think that's ridiculous because he's literally just calling out what certain Democrats are literally saying they're doing.
I just think it's ridiculous to call anything racist in a non-quantitative way. Unless it's like obviously too racist.
Okay, well, I'm not going to go around using your terminology with racism.
Okay.
So that's your issue to deal with. I guess we'll just not be able to talk about race that much since you want to use a completely different standard than everyone else.
Oh.
In the water, and this is where some people are at, and I don't think I think it's actually a clear recitation. You could just read from the El Paso Shooters Manifesto because it's very similar, except change black people with Latinos.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, this is literally at the top. There's a picture of that symbol that has been worn by so many folks over in the Azov Battalion. And then it starts what you need to know. If there's one thing I want you to get from these writings, it's that white birth rates must change. Every day the white population becomes fewer in number. To maintain a population, the people must achieve a birth rate that reaches replacement.
I don't think that racism is treating someone differently because of the color of their skin. I think that racism is treating someone badly because of the color of their skin. So, do with that what you will.
I just don't hear you saying why.
Because that's how the word is used. I'm not going to try to convince Clarence Thomas and Larry Elder that their use of the word racism is incorrect. Because they don't think that telling someone the truth, even though that truth is something that is putting out something bad about black people, I don't think that they would call that racist. Like pointing out that black people in lots of schools lots of black schools that their math scores aren't good enough. I don't think that they would think that's racist. And I don't think that's racist. That's just the truth.
So your position is that if something is true, therefore it cannot be racist?
Yes.
Okay. I'm comfortable agreeing to disagree with that position.
Fertility levels. I'm skipping ahead a little, but not in Europe, not in the rest of America, not in Australia or New Zealand. Only in Argentina is this happening. White people are failing to reproduce, failing to create families, failing to have children. But despite this sub-replacement fertility rate, the population in the West...
Specifically, statistics, not things in general. The fact that lynchings happened were racist and true. So they're not inherently incompatible. But just stating a statistic that is true is not racist.
is increasing rapidly. How is this possible? Mass immigration and the higher fertility rates of the immigrants white birth rates must change. Every day the white population becomes fewer in number. To maintain a population, the people must achieve a birth rate that reaches replacement fertility levels.
If it's
Skipping
not the
ahead a little,
truth, if
but-
it isn't the truth value of the statement that makes it not racist, what is it that makes it not racist?
It isn't treating someone unjustly by the color of their skin. That's what makes it not racist.
Not in Europe, not in the rest of America, not in Australia or New Zealand. Only in Argentina is this happening. White people are failing to reproduce, failing to create families, failing to have children. But despite this sub-replacement fertility rate, the population in the West is increasing rapidly. How is this possible? Mass immigration and the higher fertility rates of the immigrants themselves are causing this increase in the population. We're experiencing an invasion on a level never before seen in history. Millions of people pouring across our borders legally, invited by the state and corporate entities to replace white people who have failed to reproduce, failed to create the cheap labor, failed to create new consumers and a tax base that the corporations and states need to have to thrive.
Right.
He goes on
That's a lot.
to say, this is white genocide, all caps and bold.
So there's a lot there. I want to just pick apart. Let's just deal with one theme at a time.
Sure.
Invasion, right? So let's say you're in the Ukraine and Russia invades, right? They're going to change your way of life. You're going to have to go to a re-education camp. You're going to have to give up your language a little bit. And I say a little bit because Ukrainian and Russian are different. And so you're going to have to give up a sense of sovereignty. You're going to have to change where you pay your taxes. In a lot of ways, your culture and your sense of government has been invaded and transformed. That's what's at stake. That's why you don't immediately surrender and just give up the flags and say like, oh, I guess we're Russian now, right? So if you think that's the stakes in the Ukraine, the United States is willing to just give you guns to fight it out, right? So the question is, for me, is that much different than this guy gendering what he feels like is going to happen in the United States, right? So what happens when the white Christian nation falls, right? So let's say black people get reparations. There's this idea that black people can get reparations, white people aren't going to have to give up anything, it'll be fine, except black people will have like commercial land and money and assets and all this stuff that we don't have right now. I actually think that's a naive understanding of how reparations is going to work. I think if black people are going to be made whole, like it's going to take a little bit of redistribution. Some people are going to take haircuts. They're going to have to distribute assets, family contracts that have been in the family since the clan daddy won them are going to have to like now get broken up and redistributed in ways that are going to make people uncomfortable, right? So I actually think there's going to be a change in some ways of life. If your way of life has given you a quality of entitlement that is either promotes or is consistent with black degradation. Because once black degradation goes away, that means that the inequality of life that was tied to black degradation is going to have to go away. And that's a lot of quality of life.
So I hear you, and I'm willing to entertain that, but I don't want to get too sidetracked on a hypothetical reparations arrangement when there are many different kinds of arrangements that people could imagine, and that some of which would be more or less kind of more or less implicated by design, would more or less implicate kind of white wealth. And in this instance, obviously the shooter wasn't motivated by reparations. Much to my chagrin, reparations are nowhere on the table. Now, he did write, here's your reparations on his gun. I'm not saying that he wasn't like thinking about reparations, but it's not as though it was a response to reparations or any real political movement and a meaningful political movement for reparations.
So
what is the threat? You know, I want to talk about in the context of the threat that he perceives is currently on the table.
So I think the threat is naive. So there was this idea, and maybe you've heard it, I heard it like 30 years ago. Oh, America will be great in 2 generations. Everyone will be like, light brown, and because of all the intermarriage and racism will go away. And like, I thought that was kind of nonsense at the time. But if you don't want that, that would actually be threatening to your vision of America. Like, so.
Joe
But I
Biden
thought that was
talking
nonsense
about
because I don't
interracial
think-
couples is the threat.
What's up?
Joe Biden talking about interracial commercials on TV is the perceived threat.
It's a perceived threat. If the perceived, yeah, like there's this idea that the hierarchy is benign, it like can go away, but people's quality of life and way of life stays the same. I'm not sure that's the case. But what's actually bad science about this is that it's institutionally false. You don't need a majority to rule things. If you have antecedent property rights and full cultural command, like hegemony over like the institutions of culture, you only need like 25-30% to keep control. I think in South Africa you don't even need that much, right? So like it's just bad political strategy. So it's like an artificial panic in multiple ways. One, because you shouldn't be panicked about justice. Two, even if you are worried about your kind of grift of injustice, a little bit like being a minority, if you have antecedent property rights and like control over cultural apparatus, you still get to run things. There are many black places in the South that are run by white people who don't even live there because they still own like the land.
Moreover,
Right,
America is still 70% white. I mean, what always bugged me out. So I'm coming to this from a unique angle because I have been arguing
60%
for
white,
years.
by the way. 60%.
I just pulled up an article that I wrote in 2018 that really pushed back against folks like Stephen Phillips, who's an advisor at CAP and who wrote The Browning of America, and really pressed this narrative. The Democratic Party basically doesn't have to do anything but sit back and wait, and demographics are going to help them out. I push back against that not because, like Tucker Carlson, or, if you don't want to attribute these views to Tucker Carlson and a number of other people, the shooter, not because I think that the browning of America is a problem, because I believe in, white racial hierarchies, but because, to me, it was an argument against actually doing things in service of constituents, advancing the kinds of policies that people actually want politicians to advance, and instead sitting back and saying, well, they're never going to vote for all these Republicans because the Republicans are too racist, so the Democratic Party just has to be the lesser of two evils, and that's how we get into a place where no one's actually offering positive policy prescriptions. So I am also mad at this thing, but I find myself in this bizarro position where I have to concede that Tucker Carlson is right in identifying that this really is the Democratic Party's plan.
Yeah.
But the Democratic Party is having trouble pushing back against him because, they've been saying it out loud for a long time.
I hate the demographics as destiny because it's not true. Not only is it lazy politics, it's not true because you don't understand how institutions work. Even if America, if there's a browning of America, doesn't mean they're all going to go Democrats.
Right.
Institutions make Americans.
Yeah.
Right? Not biology. Institutions make Americans. So people are going to come, they're going to participate in American institutions. And if you don't have institutional control or institutional narratives, or you don't worry about building institutions or swaying institutions, you'll just get darker colored Republicans.
Here comes Ted Cruz. No, but
yeah, you'll get Ted Cruz. I remember there was one moment where both Ted Cruz and Mario Rubio were talking about who hates Spanish-speaking immigrants more in Spanish, right? So this idea that you don't have to do politics because somehow race will do the work for you is lazy, and it's institutionally naive because institutions make Americans, right? So
yes, this is what I'm trying to work through, though, Irene. So if we understand that,
right.
and I think that Tucker Carlson is not a stupid person.
No.
I think on some level he has to understand that, and to the extent that he does do populism on his show, and does, I would argue, potentially more than a lot of liberal commentators, call out corporate elites, call out militarism and interventionism, to the extent that he kind of gets how things work, or at least can nod sufficiently to how things work to get a kind of populist credibility. He also knows that the institutions are making Americans, and yet he's persisting in adopting a kind of rhetoric which even though he cleanses
What
it
are you
of
doing?
any explicit racial terminology and opts instead
What are
for
you
terms
doing?
like legacy Americans, he is still doing that. Like, he's still choosing to take this great replacement theory that has its origins in these extremist white supremacist websites and clean it up for the mainstream.
There are two things going on here. One, legacy Americans also means legacy American institutions, and legacy American institutions are racialized. So if you keep everything as is institutionally, like, that's not good for black people. Like, that just calcifies the hierarchy. So, like, I'm not very comfortable with how easily he leans on the idea of legacy Americans, especially when it comes with legacy American way of life and legacy American institution and legacy American sensibilities, which haven't been consistent with racial justice and would have to actually be markedly changed in order to be.
Right. Also, on its face, I mean, definitionally, what is a legacy American? I think that he would argue that it has to do with chronology as opposed to race, right? I'm not saying...
I think he would argue that it have to be with a way of life and, like...
Sure, but,
maybe
you know,
lineage.
how do you... I mean, legacy, I mean, what does it literally mean? I think... I tweeted this out and somebody pushed back and said, oh, well... I basically tweeted out, why aren't black people legacy Americans? You know, like, no one's been here longer than us. If anyone... I mean, obviously some Native Americans and some white people have. But when you look at the huge immigration wave that happened in the 40 years of, like, the last 20 years of the 19th century and the first 20 years of the 20th century, where 20 million European immigrants came to this country, you know, compared to, you know, the 12.5 million that were brought in the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas, you know, if anyone got great replaced, there are a lot of black Americans who can make that
he's talking about
argument.
legacy Americana. He's not talking about, like, actual people. He's talking about legacy way of life.
Right, but he gets...
It's a nostalgia.
I think he gets away... Like, I'm pushing this point not because I'm trying to, you know, wedge black Americans into legacy Americans for any kind of, like, benefit or to get a pat on the head by Tucker Carlson, but because I think that when you start to try to tease out what he means by these phrases and, like, challenge who has more entitlement, as it were, to this country, not that we should think of it that way, but to the extent that he does, who has been here longer, who has fought in more of its wars, who is more invested in it, who has had a bigger cultural impact, who can lay claim to other parts of the American legacy, I think you can start to chip away at this really neat job he's done at cleansing the rhetoric that is kind of white supremacist in origin of all of its racial valences.
Right. I don't know if he has. I mean, who really buys that he's cleansed it? I don't know.
Well, it's tough. It's tough because when you listen to him, we should listen to a clip. I want you to respond to a clip because when you listen to him, like, the man is not stupid. He's done a really good job of basically making arguments without saying a thing about race, and then waiting for people to call him racist, and then priming his audience to say, when they call me racist, it's because they want to shut me up. It's because they want to do a speech suppression, you know. And so instead, he says things like, you know, he will make the explicit political argument: these new voters help Democrats; they don't help Republicans, which is also what Democrats are saying. So they don't really have a lot of leeway there to push back.
And it might not even be true.
What do you mean?
No, like I said, I think recent immigrants, they didn't come, like, nobody. My dad immigrated from Ghana. My mom is from South Carolina. Her people came over on boats. There are people who come over on planes, and there are people who come in on boats. So, like, you don't immigrate to the United States to take up with the losing. Dad immigrated from Ghana. My mom is from South Carolina. Her people came over on boats. There are people who come over on planes, and there are people who come in on boats. So, like, you don't immigrate to the United States to take up with the losing team. Like, very few, like, even Baldwin said, I'm tired of these people coming here on Friday and then by Wednesday calling me the N-word. And, like, this idea that recent immigrants will necessarily vote Democrat or, like, be super progressive, right, or, like, super, like to take over the way of life is really kind of, it's not set in stone. It's not fake.
Right. On the whole, more recent immigrant populations tend to be more socially conservative, more religious. And over time, many of them, what we're seeing, tend toward the Republican Party. And the Republican Party, I think, would have recouped more benefits from recent immigrant populations if they had been less virulently or openly, bigoted in the past. And I think they are hip to the idea that they have to clean it up. I observed during 2020 that the RNC was more diverse than the DNC, the National Convention. And they're playing the identity politics games now better than Democrats.
I think people of color who are conservative are okay with orderly white nationalism because I don't think political participation is the most important thing in American life. I think we're a civil society nation. As long as you let me run my business and make money, you get to set the rules. I'll get a little bit ticked when I then win by your rules and then you'll change the rules. That's what happened with Jews in the beginning of the 20th century. And that's what happens with Asians in California right now when they just took away the SAT. Because I think, and I know things, that Asian Americans were outscoring white Americans and white Americans wanted their tests back. They wanted their spots back.
Yeah, and they'll blame us. We'll be the scapegoats for it. but so what's so interesting to me though is not just the straight up diversity. It's the real embrace of colorblind racism. So I saw that Fox News on Monday, as everyone was bearing down on Tucker Carlson, tweeted out this Tucker Carlson quote where he does the Martin Luther King thing. And he's like, I'd love to be judged by the content of my skin and the skin and the content of, sorry. I'd love to be judged not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character, with next to a big picture of his face. And then he'll say things like, tell me what you think about this hypothesis that I've worked out.
Talk.
Okay. Liberals have done a piss poor job talking about race.
Okay, true.
They have been using race as a proxy for class because they are allergic to talking about class.
Okay.
Sometimes doing so is appropriate. Many times it is not appropriate. But by using race as a proxy for class, they have stripped the economic conversations that we could be having that could really form a coalition of working people across these groups. Moreover, they've opened up the door to Republicans to use basically disparity discourse to say, I'm not talking about black people because they're black. I'm not talking about immigrants because they are Latino. I'm saying specifically this negative thing that is in the statistics about black people. They're disproportionately causing crime. Immigrants are disproportionately causing crime or leaving trash in the desert or whatever it is. And I'm saying that specific thing is not racialized. It is just a statistical fact. And you're the one that's racializing it, not me. I'm judging them by the content of the character. I'm judging it by the thing that they did. It's not because they're black, but we have to be honest about the fact that black people are like this. And Democrats, because they've been speaking in generalities for so long, are allergic to some of these statistics and don't really know what to do with them.
I know what to do with them.
Well, sure. But they're unable now, they've been basically defanged from talking about any kind of structural critique because that's all now CRT and we're not allowed to say it.
I wanted to say it.
I mean, yeah, but now they're so on the back foot that Republicans have really figured out how to talk about race in a way that Democrats are now completely incapable of addressing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Democrats don't want to talk about political things. This is why Democrats will try to run away from the CRT debate, but Ron DeSantis in Florida will say, all right, so I'm having an anti-communism day. We're just going to talk crap about all the communisms and make sure that everybody knows how bad communism is in every way, and I'm just going to put it in the curriculum. So I'll have to decide what goes into school curriculum. And Democrats don't want to do that, and Republicans have no problem doing that. That's why you have, a fight against all of these not particularly scientific theories that still find their way into around sex and biology that still find their way into public school curricula, or historical theories that aren't particularly representative of the history, especially of the region. We tell people in Georgia that the founding father of Georgia, Gwinnett, didn't go up there to secure slavery, where it might not have been John Adams' issues, And it might not have been Washington's issue, and it might not have been Jefferson's issues, but it was sure Georgia at least wanted to secure property. And when he meant property, he meant like
People.
your great-great-great-grandparents, right? So like these kinds of things, Republicans will put in the content of the education curriculum because that's part of politics to like educate.
Colleges, and that's part of why there was that assault on public colleges in the 80s and the assault in the UC system from, by Reagan, and all of the after effects we've seen in all the college campus discourse in the last 10 years or so. But I don't know.
College isn't where this. We don't lose state legislatures because of college. We lose it in K through 12. Like if you're waiting for college to do your work, you're still not doing the work.
No, I'm agreeing with you, but what I feel like happened is that there was a natural kind of, not purposeful, because Democrats have never been that pointed and purposeful, but there was or curb it. And I agree with you that there's no confidence from liberals in actually owning the idea of doing an ideological project. That Republicans accuse them of doing an ideological project because some
The Godfather by Mario Puzo. Copyright 1969 by Mario Puzo. All rights reserved. Author's dedication for Anthony Clery. Book 1. Behind every great fortune, there is a crime. Balzac. Chapter 1. Amerigo Bonacera sat in New York Criminal Court number 3 and waited for justice, vengeance on the men who had so cruelly hurt his daughter, who had tried to dishonor her. The judge, a formidably heavy-featured man, rolled up the sleeves of his black robe as if to physically chastise the 2 young men standing before the bench. His face was cold with majestic contempt. But there was something false in all this that Amerigo Bonacera sensed, but did not yet understand. The judge said,
"You acted like the worst kind of degenerates."
Yes, thought Amerigo Bonacera. Animals. The 2 young men, glossy hair, crew-cut, scrubbed, clean-cut faces composed into humble contrition, bowed their heads in submission. The judge went on.
"You acted like wild beasts in a jungle, and you are fortunate you did not sexually molest that poor girl, or I'd put you behind bars for 20 years.
The judge paused. His eyes, beneath impressively thick brows, flickered slyly toward the sallow-faced Amerigo Bonacera, then lowered to a stack of probation reports before him. He frowned and shrugged, as if convinced against his own natural desire. He spoke again.
But because of your youth, your clean records, because of your fine families, and because the law in its majesty does not seek vengeance, I hereby sentence you to 3 years confinement to the penitentiary. Sentence to be suspended."
Only 40 years of professional mourning kept the overwhelming frustration and hatred from showing on Amerigo Bonacera's face. His beautiful young daughter was still in the hospital with her broken jaw wired together. And now, these 2 animales went free. It had all been a farce. He watched the happy parents cluster around their darling sons. Oh, they were all happy now. They were smiling now. The black bile, sourly bitter, rose in Bonacera's throat, overflowed through tightly clenched teeth. He used his white linen pocket handkerchief and held it against his lips. He was standing, so when the two young men strode freely up the aisle, confident and cool-eyed, smiling, not giving him so much as a glance, he let them pass without saying a word, pressing the fresh linen against his mouth. The parents of the Animales were coming by now, 2 men and 2 women his age, but more American in their dress. They glanced at him, shamefaced, yet in their eyes was an odd, triumphant defiance. Out of control, Bonacera leaned forward toward the aisle, the linen at his eyes now.
You will weep as I have wept. I will make you weep as your children make me weep.
The defense attorneys bringing up the rear swept their clients forward in a tight little band, enveloping the 2 young men who had started back down the aisle as if to protect their parents. A huge bailiff moved quickly to block the row in which Bonacera stood, but it was not necessary. All his years in America, Amerigo Bonacera had trusted in law and order, and he had prospered thereby. Now, though his brain smoked with hatred, the wild visions of buying a gun and killing the 2 young men jangled the very bones of his skull. Bonacera turned to his still uncomprehending wife and explained to her,
They have made fools of us.
He paused and then made his decision, no longer fearing the cost.
For justice, we must go on our knees to Don Corleone.
In a garishly decorated Los Angeles hotel suite, Johnny Fontaine was as jealously drunk as any ordinary husband. Sprawled on a red couch, he drank straight from the bottle of scotch in his hand, then washed the taste away by dunking his mouth in a crystal bucket of ice cubes and water. It was 4 in the morning, and he was spinning.
I'll be right back.
It's still not ready?
Uh-huh.
You might as well just get rid of this. And not come back here.
Yeah, I was already never coming back here.
We're not wasting our time even more.
Obviously.
How long have we been here? Over 30 minutes?
Over 30 minutes. It's fucking ridiculous. The line's been moving this whole time.
Yeah.
These people are fucking incompetent.
They're just like, fuck DoorDash.
Yeah.
That's for fucking sure. So fuck that. Let's go.
Uh-huh.
How much do we get paid?
$362. Yeah. Fucking ridiculous.
Better than nothing, I guess.
Uh-huh.
I would just avoid all fast food places if
Yep.
you can.
I was avoiding all the other ones, like about to turn this down.
Uh-huh.
Because you can't fucking trust the employees at any of those goddamn
I don't
places.
know. It's fucking insane.
You can't even really trust the employees at Dashmart, but they're better than like fast food employees, at least. Decline.
Fuck that store.
Fuck that store. Fuck that fucking store.
Drunken fantasies of murdering his trampy wife when she got home, if she ever did come home.
It fools of us.
He paused and then made his decision, no longer fearing the cost.
Honey, not in the face. I'm making a picture.
Shoot shield. Margot rolled away and in a dancer's spring was on her feet facing him. She went into a childish mocking dance and chanted,
Johnny never hurt me. Johnny never hurt me.
then, almost sadly, with grave beauty, she said,
You poor, silly bastard. Giving me cramps like a kid. Ah, Johnny, you always will be a dumb, romantic guinea. You even make love like a kid. You still think screwing is really like those dopey songs you used to sing.
she shook her head.
Poor Johnny. Goodbye, Johnny.
She walked into the bedroom, and he heard her turn the key in the lock. Johnny sat on the floor with his face in his hands. The sick, humiliating despair overwhelmed him. And then, the gutter toughness that had helped him survive the jungle of Hollywood made him pick up the phone and call for a car to take him to the airport. There was one person who could save him. He would go back to New York. He would go back to the one man with the power, the wisdom he needed, and the love he still trusted. His godfather, Corleone. The baker, Nazzarini, pudgy and crusty as his great Italian loaves, still dusty with flour, scowled at his wife, his nubile daughter, Catherine, and his baker's helper, Enzo. Enzo had changed into his prisoner of war uniform with its green-lettered armband, and was terrified that the scene would make him late reporting back to Governor's Island. One of the many thousands of Italian army prisoners paroled daily to work in the American economy, he lived in constant fear of that parole being revoked. And so, the little comedy being played now was for him a serious business. Nazzarini asked fiercely,
Have you dishonored my family? Have you given my daughter a little package to remember you by? And now that the war is over, and you know America will kick your ass back to your village full of shit in Sicily?
Enzo, a very short, strongly built boy, put his hand over his heart and said almost in tears, yet cleverly,
Patrone, I swear by the Holy Virgin, I have never taken advantage of your kindness. I love your daughter with all respect. I ask for her hand with all respect. I know I have no right, but if they send me back to Italy, I can never come back to America. I will never be able to marry Caterina.
Nazzarini's wife, Filomena, spoke to the point. She said to her pudgy husband,
Stop all this foolishness. You know what you must do. Keep Enzo here. Send him to hide with our cousins in Long Island.
Catherine was weeping. She was already plump, homely, and sprouting a faint mustache. She would never get a husband as handsome as Enzo, never find another man who touched her body in secret places with such respectful love. She screamed at her father.
I'm going live in Italy. I'll run away if you don't keep Enzo here.
Nazzarini glanced at her shrewdly. She was a hot number, this daughter of his. He had seen her brush her swelling buttocks against Enzo's front when the baker's helper squeezed behind her to fill the counter baskets with hot loaves from the oven. The young rascal's hot loaf would be in her oven, Nazzarini thought lewdly, if proper steps were not taken. Enzo must be kept in America and be made an American citizen. And there was only one man who could arrange such an affair. The Godfather, Don Corleone. All of these people and many others received engraved invitations to the wedding of Miss Constanza Corleone, to be celebrated on the last Saturday in August 1945.
What?
The father of the bride, Don Vito Corleone, never forgot his old friends and neighbors, though he himself now lived in a huge house on Long Island. The reception would be held in that house, and the festivities would go on all day. There's no doubt it would be a momentous occasion. The war with the Japanese had just ended, so there would not be any nagging fear for their sons fighting in the army to cloud these festivities. A wedding was just what people needed to show their joy. And so, on that Saturday morning, the friends of Don Corleone streamed out of New York City to do him honor. They bore cream-colored envelopes stuffed with cash as bridal gifts, no chips. Inside each envelope, a card established the identity of the giver and the measure of his respect for the Godfather. A respect truly earned. Don Vito Corleone was a man to whom everybody came for help, and never were they disappointed. He made no empty promises, nor the craven excuse that his hands were tied by more powerful forces in the world than himself. It was not necessary that he be your friend. It was not even important that you had no means with which to repay him. Only one thing was required, that you yourself, proclaim your friendship. And then, no matter how poor or powerless the supplicant, Don Corleone would take that man's troubles to his heart, and he would let nothing stand in the way to a solution of that man's woe. His reward? Friendship, the respectful title of Don, and sometimes the more affectionate salutation of Godfather. And perhaps, to show respect only, never for profit, some humble gift, a gallon of homemade wine or a basket of peppered tarales, specially baked to grace his Christmas table. It was understood, it was mere good manners, to proclaim that you were in his debt and that he had the right to call upon you at any time to redeem your debt by some small service. Now, on this great day, his daughter's wedding day, Don Vito Corleone stood in the doorway of his Long Beach home to greet his guests. All of them known, all of them trusted. Many of them owed their good fortune in life to the Don, and on this intimate occasion felt free to call him Godfather to his face. Even the people performing festal services were his friends. The bartender was an old comrade, whose gift was all the wedding liquors and his own expert skills. The waiters were the friends of Don Corleone's sons. The food on the garden picnic tables had been cooked by the Don's wife and her friends, and the gaily festooned one-acre garden itself had been decorated by the young girl chums of the bride. Don Corleone received everyone, rich and poor, powerful and humble, with an equal show of love. He slighted no one. That was his character. And the guests so exclaimed at how well he looked in his tux that an inexperienced observer might easily have thought that Don himself was the lucky groom. Standing at the door with him were two of his three sons. The eldest, baptized Santino, but called Sonny by everyone except his father, was looked at askance by the older Italian men, with admiration by the younger. Sonny Corleone was tall for a first-generation American of Italian parentage, almost 6 feet, and his crop of bushy, curly hair made him look even taller. His face was that of a gross Cupid, the features even, but the bow-shaped lips thickly sensual, the dimpled, cleft chin in some curious way obscene. He was built as powerfully as a bull, and it was common knowledge that he was so generously endowed by nature that his martyred wife feared the marriage bed as unbelievers once feared the rag. It was whispered that when as a youth he had visited houses of ill fame, even the most hardened and fearless Bhutan, after an awed inspection of his massive organ, demanded double price. Here at the wedding feast, some young matrons, wide-hipped, wide-mouthed, measured Sonny Corleone with coolly confident eyes. But on this particular day, they were wasting their time. Sonny Corleone, despite the presence of his wife and 3 small children, had plans for his sister's maid of honor, Lucy Mancini. This young girl, fully aware, sat at a garden table in her pink formal gown, a tiara of flowers in her glossy black hair. She had flirted with Sonny in the past week of rehearsals and squeezed his hand that morning at the altar. A maiden could do no more. She did not care that he would never be the great man his father had proved to be. Sonny Corleone had strength, he had courage. He was generous, and his heart was admitted to be as big as his organ. Yet he did not have his father's humility, but instead a quick, hot temper that led him into errors of judgment. Though he was a great help in his father's business, there were many who doubted that he would become the heir to it. The second son, Federico, called Fred or Fredo, was a child every Italian prayed to the saints for. Dutiful, loyal, always at the service of his father, living with his parents at age 30. He was short and burly, not handsome, but with the same Cupid head of the family, the curly helmet of hair over the round face and sensual bow-shaped lips. Only in Fred, these lips were not sensual, but granite-like. Inclined to dourness, he was still a crutch to his father, never disputed him, never embarrassed him by scandalous behavior with women. Despite all these virtues, he did not have that personal magnetism, that animal force so necessary for a leader of men. And he, too, was not expected to inherit the family business. The third son, Michael Corleone, did not stand with his father and his 2 brothers, but sat at a table in the most secluded corner of the garden. But even there, he could not escape the attentions of the family friends. Michael Corleone was the youngest son of the Don and the only child who had refused the great man's direction. He did not have the heavy, Cupid-shaped face of the other children, and his jet-black hair was straight rather than curly. His skin was a clear olive brown that would have been called beautiful in a girl. He was handsome in a delicate way. Indeed, there had been a time when the Don had worried about his youngest son's masculinity, a worry that was put to rest when Michael Corleone became 17 years old. Now, this youngest son sat at a table in the extreme corner of the garden to proclaim his chosen alienation from father and family. Beside him sat the American girl everyone had heard about, but whom no one had seen until this day. He had, of course, shown the proper respect and introduced her to everyone at the wedding, including his family. They were not impressed with her. She was too thin. She was too fair. Her face was too sharply intelligent for a woman. Her manner too free for a maiden. Her name, too, was outlandish to their ears. She called herself Kay Adams. If she had told them that her family had settled in America 200 years ago and her name was a common one, they would have shrugged. Every guest noticed that the Don paid no particular attention to his third son. Michael had been his favorite before the war, and obviously the chosen heir to run the family business when the proper moment came. He had all the quiet force and intelligence of his great father, the born instinct to act in such a way that men had no recourse but to respect him. But when World War II broke out, Michael Corleone volunteered for the Marine Corps. He defied his father's express command when he did so. Don Corleone had no desire, no intention of letting his youngest son be killed in the service of a power foreign to himself. Doctors had been bribed, secret arrangements had been made, a great deal of money had been spent to take the proper precautions. But Michael was 21 years of age, and nothing could be done against his own willfulness. He enlisted and fought over the Pacific Ocean. He became a captain and won medals. In 1944, his picture was printed in Life magazine with a photo layout of his deeds. A friend had shown Don Corleone the magazine. His family did not dare, and the Don had grunted disdainfully and said, "He performs those miracles for strangers." When Michael Corleone was discharged early in 1945 to recover from a disabling wound, he had no idea that his father had arranged his release. He stayed home for a few weeks, then, without consulting anyone, entered Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and so he left his father's house to return for the wedding of his sister and to show his own future wife to them, the washed-out rag of an American girl. Michael Corleone was amusing Kay Adams by telling her little stories about some of the more colorful wedding guests. He was, in turn, amused by her finding these people exotic, and as always, charmed by her intense interest in anything new and foreign to her experience. Finally, her attention was caught by a small group of men gathered around a wooden barrel of homemade wine. The men were Amerigo Bonacera, Nazarene the baker, Anthony Capola, and Luca Brasi. With her usual alert intelligence, she remarked on the fact that these four men did not seem particularly happy. Michael smiled.
No, they're not. They're waiting to see my father in private. They have favors to ask.
And indeed, it was easy to see that all four men constantly followed the Don with their eyes. As Don Corleone stood greeting guests, a black Chevrolet sedan came to a stop on the far side of the paved mall. Two men in the front seat pulled notebooks from their jackets and, with no attempt at concealment, jotted down license numbers of the other cars parked around the mall. Sonny turned to his father.
Those guys over there must be cops.
Don Corleone shrugged.
I don't know in the street. They can do what they please.
Sonny's heavy Cupid face grew red with anger.
Those lousy bastards, they don't respect anything.
He left the steps of the house and walked across the mall to where the black sedan was parked. He thrust his face angrily close to the face of the driver, who did not flinch, but flapped open his wallet to show a green identification card. Sonny stepped back without saying a word. He spat so that the spittle hit the back door of the sedan and walked away. He was hoping the driver would get out of the sedan and come after him on the mall, but nothing happened. When he reached the steps, he said to his father,
Those guys are FBI men. They're taking down all the license numbers. Snotty bastards.
Don Corleone knew who they were. His closest and most intimate friends had been advised to attend the wedding in automobiles not their own. And though he disapproved of his son's foolish display of anger, the tantrum served a purpose. It would convince the interlopers that their presence was unexpected and unprepared for. So Don Corleone himself was not angry. He had long ago learned that society imposes insults that must be borne, comforted by the knowledge that in this world there comes a time when the most humble of men, if he keeps his eyes open, can take his revenge on the most powerful. It was this knowledge that prevented the Don from losing the humility all his friends admired in him. But now in the garden behind the house, a four-piece band began to play. All the guests had arrived. Don Corleone put the intruders out of his mind and led his two sons to the wedding feast. There were now hundreds of guests in the huge garden, some dancing on the wooden platform bedecked with flowers, others sitting at long tables piled high with spicy food and gallon jugs of black homemade wine. The bride, Connie Corleone, sat in splendor at a special raised table with her groom, the maid of honor, bridesmaids, and ushers. It was a rustic setting in the old Italian style. Not to the bride's taste, but Connie had consented to a guinea wedding to please her father because she had so displeasured him in her choice of a husband. The groom, Carlo Rizzi, was a half-breed, born of a Sicilian father and the North Italian mother from whom he had inherited his blonde hair and blue eyes. His parents lived in Nevada, and Carlo had left the state because of a little trouble with the law. In New York, he met Sonny Corleone, and so met the sister. Don Corleone, of course, sent trusted friends to Nevada, and they reported that Carlo's police trouble was a youthful indiscretion with a gun, not serious, that could easily be wiped off the books to leave the youth with a clean record. They also came back with detailed information on legal gambling in Nevada, which greatly interested the Don, and which he had been pondering ever since. It was part of the Don's greatness that he profited from everything. Connie Corleone was a not quite pretty girl, thin and nervous, and certain to become shrewish later in life. But today, transformed by her white bridal gown and eager virginity, she was so radiant as to be almost beautiful. Beneath the wooden table, her hand rested on the muscular thigh of her groom. Her Cupid bow mouth pouted to give him an airy kiss. She thought him incredibly handsome. Carlo Rizzi had worked in the open desert air while very young, heavy laborer's work. Now he had tremendous forearms, and his shoulders bulged the jacket of his tux. He basked in the adoring eyes of his bride and filled her glass with wine. He was elaborately courteous to her, as if they were both actors in a play, but his eyes kept flickering toward the huge silk purse the bride wore on her right shoulder, in which was now stuffed full of money envelopes. How much did it hold? 10,000, 20,000? Carlo Rizzi smiled. It was only the beginning. He had, after all, married into a royal family. They would have to take care of it. In the crowd of guests, a dapper young man with the sleek head of a ferret was also studying the silk purse. From sheer habit, Paulie Gatto wondered just how he could go about hijacking that fat pocketbook. The idea amused him, but he knew it was idle, innocent dreaming as small children dream of knocking out tanks with pop guns. He watched his boss, fat, middle-aged Peter Clemenza, whirling young girls around the wooden dance floor in a rustic and lusty tarantella. Clemenza, immensely tall, immensely huge, danced with such skill and abandon, his hard belly lecherously bumping the breasts of younger, tinier women, that all the guests were applauding him. Older women grabbed his arm to become his next partner. The younger men respectfully cleared off the floor and clapped their hands in time to the mandolin's wild strumming. When Clemenza finally collapsed in a chair, Paulie Gatto brought him a glass of icy black wine and wiped the perspiring Jove-like brow with his silk handkerchief. Clemenza was blowing like a whale as he gulped down the wine. But instead of thanking Paulie, he said curtly,
"Never mind being a dance judge. Do your job. Take a walk around the neighborhood and see everything is okay."
Paulie slid away into the crowd. The band took a refreshment break. A young man named Nino Valenti picked up a discarded mandolin, put his left foot up on a chair, and began to sing a coarse Sicilian love song. Nino Valenti's face was handsome, though bloated by continual drinking, and he was already a little drunk. He rolled his eyes as his tongue caressed the obscene lyrics. The women shrieked with glee, and the men shouted the last word of each stanza with the singer. Don Corleone, notoriously straight-laced in such matters, though his stout wife was screaming joyfully with the others, disappeared tactfully into the house. Seeing this, Sonny Corleone made his way to the bride's table and sat down beside young Lucy Mancini, the maid of honor. They were singing. His wife was in the kitchen, putting the last touches on the serving of the wedding cake. Sonny whispered a few words in the young girl's ear, and she rose. Sonny waited a few minutes, and then casually followed her, stopping to talk with a guest here and there as he worked his way through the crowd. All eyes followed them. The maid of honor, thoroughly Americanized by 3 years of college, was a ripe girl who already had a reputation. All through the marriage rehearsal, she had flirted with Sonny Corleone in a teasing, joking way she thought was permitted because he was the best man and her wedding partner. Now, holding her pink gown up off the ground, Lucy Mancini went into the house, smiling with false innocence, ran lightly up the stairs to the bathroom. She stayed there for a few moments. When she came out, Sonny Corleone was on the landing above, beckoning her upward. From behind the closed window of Don Corleone's office, a slightly raised corner room, Thomas Hagen watched the wedding party in the festooned garden. The walls behind him were stacked with law books. Hagen was the Don's lawyer and acting consigliere, or counselor, and as such, held the most vital subordinate position in the family business. He and the Don had solved many a knotty problem in this room, and so, when he saw the Godfather leave the festivities and enter the house, he knew, wedding or no, there would be a little work this day. The Don would be coming to see him. Then, Hagen saw Sonny Corleone whisper in Lucy Mancini's ear in their little comedy as he followed her into the house. Hagen grimaced, debated whether to inform the Don, and decided against it. He went to the desk and picked up a handwritten list of the people who had been granted permission to see Don Corleone privately. When the Don entered the room, Hagen handed him the list. Don Corleone nodded and said,
"Leave Buonasera to the end."
Hagen used the French doors and went directly out into the garden to where the supplicants clustered around the barrel of wine. He pointed to the baker, the pudgy Nazzarini. Don Corleone greeted the baker with an embrace. They had played together as children in Italy and had grown up in friendship. Every Easter, freshly baked clotted cheese and wheat germ pies, their crusts yolk gold, big around as truck wheels, arrived at Don Corleone's home. On Christmas, on family birthdays, rich, creamy pastries proclaimed the Nazzarini's respect. And all through the years, lean and fat, Nazzarini cheerfully paid his dues to the bakery union organized by the Don in his salad days, never asking for a favor in return, except for the chance to buy black market OPA sugar coupons during the war. Now, the time had come for the baker to claim his rights as a loyal friend, and Don Corleone looked forward with great pleasure to granting his request. He gave the baker a Di Nobili cigar and a glass of yellow Strega, and put his hand on the man's shoulder to urge him on. That was the mark of the Don's humanity. He knew from bitter experience what courage it took to ask a favor from a fellow man. The baker told the story of his daughter in Enzo, a fine Italian lad from Sicily, captured by the American army, sent to...
My dear friend, put all your worries aside.
He went on to explain very carefully what must be done. The congressman of the district must be petitioned. The congressman would propose a special bill that would allow Enzo to become a citizen. The bill would surely pass Congress, a privilege all those rascals extended to each other. Don Corleone explained that this would cost money. The going price was now $2,000. He, Don Corleone, would guarantee performance and accept payment. Did his friend agree? The baker nodded his head vigorously. He did not expect such a great favor for nothing. That was understood. A special act of Congress does not come cheap. Nazzarini was almost tearful in his thanks. Don Corleone walked him to the door, assuring him that competent people would be sent to the bakery to arrange all details, complete all necessary documents. The baker embraced him before disappearing into the garden. Hagen smiled at the Don.
That's a good investment for Nazzarini. A son-in-law and a cheap lifetime helper in his bakery, all for $2,000.
He paused.
Who do I give this job to?
Don Corleone frowned in thought.
Not to our paisan. Give it to the Jew in the next district. Have the home addresses changed. I think there might be many such cases now the war is over. We should have extra people in Washington that can handle the overflow and not raise the price.
Hagen made a note on his pad.
Not Congressman Luteco. Try Fisher.
The next man Hagen brought in was a very simple case. His name was Anthony Coppola, and he was the son of a man Don Corleone had worked with in the railroad yards in his youth. Coppola needed $500 to open a pizzeria, for a deposit on fixtures and a special oven. For reasons not gone into, credit was not available.
Don't ask me questions without pausing.
The Don reached into his pocket and took out a roll of bills. It was not quite a...
What are you doing?
I got a fucking message from the person that said if there aren't 2 apartment buildings, you're in the wrong lot. Or if there's only 1 apartment building, you're in the wrong lot.
Okay, well, you need to call them and ask them how to get to the right lot if you're in the... Just driving around aimlessly is not going to help. Yeah, I don't see any roads to get to where he is, so... You're gonna need to call him.